Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Toontown Online development live stream here at ToonFest. I'm joined here by a whole bunch of very awesome people, former Disney Imagineers who made this game possible. And rather than babbling on, I'm just going to go ahead and let each of them introduce themselves to you.
And should I go ahead and introduce myself?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, fine. My name is Bruce Woodside. I was the animation director on Toontown.
And what was your favorite Toontown project that you worked on?
The start of it, actually, the initial sessions in the conference room. Those were an awful lot of fun. Just getting it off the ground was fun.
Cool. Well, I'm Felipe Lara. I was the art director. And then in the last couple of years of Toontown, I was creative director as well. And my favorite projects were also at the beginning. The beginning was awesome, like putting everything together, getting it off the ground. There were also, I think the fishing was pretty cool. And I really liked also at the very end, we started working on Toontown 2, and we put together a couple of prototypes that they were a lot of fun to work on as well. So
Awesome. And Felipe, expect some questions about that later, because now that you've said it, the Toontown fans are going to, they're going to want to hear it. All right. Next is Jesse.
Yeah, hey there, Jesse Shell here. I was the designer on Toontown in the beginning, right up until about launch, and then later helped add some parts to Toontown as part of Shell Games. I think my favorite part, I have to agree, like working on the beginning, like it was so exciting, just kind of spinning it up from nothing and figuring out what Toontown should be. And I think maybe the chat systems was definitely one of my favorite things, kind of getting that working, figuring it all out, how that should work. That was really fun.
I guess I'm next. Hey, I'm Joe Shockett. Let's see, I started at Imagineering when I was in college. I was, I guess, 20, maybe 21. It was kind of a crazy studio that was a couple years before Toontown. We worked on a couple different projects for Disney Quest before Toontown. And then, my role on the project was quite a bit of game design, a lot of game programming, a lot of brainstorming, just building the client side of things. I was there for, 10, 12 years at Disney. And my favorite thing that I, personally probably had the most impact on was probably the early quest system. And we can talk about this more later, but in the very first phase kind of beta release of Toontown, there was no quest system. There were cogs out there, or they were called suits maybe at the time. And you could go out and fight the suits, and you just kind of played until you were bored, which was not a great experience. And so we said, hey, we need some kind of quest system. And so we put in just the bare bones, like, why don't you defeat 3 pencil pushers and come back? And people just loved it. They were like, okay, I can do that. And they went out and, beat their 3 pencil pushers and checked it off, and then came back and said, give me another one. And you could sort of see that loop start to play. And we didn't really have a strong game loop. We had the pieces of it. But when we started to put in the quests and the coins and the mini games and really hooked up the structure, that was exciting to see. Over to you, Sean.
Yeah, hi, I'm Sean Patton. I was an intern at Walt Disney Imagineering back in 2002, and I worked a little on the Toon Creator and then some mini games, Match Mini. But then at Shell Games, as Jesse mentioned, we worked on Toontown Parties and Toontown Racing, and I was very involved in Toontown Parties, so that would probably be my favorite aspect that I worked on. So that was a lot of fun.
Great. And speaking of your internship, Sean, you sent me a video, I think a few weeks back, never before seen footage of your Toontown internship in 2002. So I figured we can go ahead and show that off to the fans here.
Recorded off an ancient VHS tape. People don't even know what that is anymore.
Is there anything you want to say about this video, Sean, before I start it?
Nothing can prepare you.
All right, here we go. All right.
Wow. Nice.
Let me go ahead and stop that.
How did I capture that footage? Like 2002 to capture video footage. No.
Yeah, I have no idea how you were doing that.
Probably held up a camera in front of your monitor.
Seems bad.
Maybe you would have seen. You'd think there'd be scan lines or something. I don't know how you were doing it.
So, fun fact, Sean, Match Mini is one of the few places that a Disney character still exists in Toontown written. It's
Really?
like Match Minis, Clarabelle's catalog are pretty much the only places where you can still find a 3D Disney character there. Now, to talk about those early days a little bit, what was the feeling with you guys working on Toontown and trying to get it started, without having the community there yet? What were sort of your expectations of what this game was really going to be?
Well, yeah, we
Open
were
question,
really
anyone?
scared. Yeah, I know we were really scared. We did not know how it was gonna go. I mean, MMOs were popular, but would this be able to work out? Because we were doing it, on a pretty low budget. It wasn't like we had the whole Disney company behind us. It was really viewed as kind of an experiment. So we, I know that we kind of had it out in beta quietly, and we're using the excitement to kind of justify that it should keep going. And so the early players were actually hugely important for us. If people didn't like it, I think it would have killed the project. Is kind of how I feel about it.
Yeah, we were also young and didn't sort of know any better, like how hard what we were doing probably was at the time. Because you have to remember back to where there were so many risks we were taking. It's not like online games were a thing, 3D game engines were not a thing yet. Like AWS, like hosting in the cloud was not a thing yet. Putting your credit card online was not something people were doing back then. There were so many unproven risks that had to play out right if this was going to be successful. And so I think a lot of the attitude was sort of, let's see if we can do this at all, which made it really fun for me.
Yeah, definitely.
I remember at some point we were collecting all the good feedback that we got from the beta version to try to justify the budget. And at some point, because it was about to be killed, and then Disney Online came to the rescue, like almost last minute. And we had this pile of good feedback. I remember seeing a bunch, like a binder like this thick with a bunch of stuff that we were collecting to prove that it had a future. It was pretty crazy.
Yeah, we were pulling stuff off of some message board or something. I don't remember what that was.
Yeah, I don't remember, but we printed it out, and there was this big binder. That's all I remember.
That's awesome.
The other thing that was crazy was when, I don't know, the way I recall it, it was this rumor that Roy Disney had seen it, and he thought it was bad taste when we had the suits, and then before we had the cogs. And
that wasn't a rumor. That really happened.
That was this freak out, everybody meeting. What are we gonna do? How do we fix this?
Yeah, he sent a memo. Yeah,
that's how the cogs came about. It was his wife who objected.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. She was the one who was mad, but he's the one who wrote the memo. So yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
So speaking of big changes, Joe, you talked about, how Toontown originally didn't have quests. And, as we know, originally the cogs weren't even cogs. They were the suits. What were some of the other big vision shifts from what Toontown was before it launched to what the fans see today?
Well, one of the big ones, and Jesse can probably talk more about this than I can, but Toontown did not start out as a internet game for people to play at home. It started out as a game for the theme parks at Epcot, where we made a 4-player version, and you played it was called Toon Tag, right?
Yeah.
And but it proved out a little bit of the 3D engine. It was it networked, or were all four playing on the same machine?
So it's funny. It started as a networked demo, right? Because first we did the R&D demo to prove out that like networking was possible and that it could be fun for kids. Like it was like, could network games be fun for kids? Like in 1997 or whenever that was like a unknown question.
Sure.
You know, that was back when like we weren't even sure. Could you do the Disney character? Could you do Mickey in 3D? It was
Right.
kind of like weird question.
That was a big test. Yeah.
Yeah,
I remember we had to do an art
Yeah.
test for the studio to say like, could we pull off Mickey in 3D? Is it something that they would accept as Disney quality?
But we knew Bruce and Felipe together. They would be able to get this. They would be able to make it happen. Yeah, but so we had a network version, but the version we actually put in Epcot wasn't networked. It was running off of a Silicon graphics machine that could support 4 screens at once.
Mhm.
So it was kind of like it was networked, but it really wasn't networked. But building those models and all of that gave us leverage to kind of get started on Toontown.
The other fun story I remember, for those interested in kind of the technical and network side of things, early days, again, there was no cloud hosting. You could not just get a server up like you can today for 50 cents. And so we ran all of Toontown off of one computer on, I think it was on Roger's desk in the back of the studio.
Yep.
And it ran like that for months until, one day we get a call from like the Disney Imagineering IT folks. And they're like, hey, our network is melting and we've traced it to your building. Can you tell us what's going on in there? And sure enough, this one PC that was hosting, Toontown, which had just started to sort of go viral, and people were telling their friends about it, was like melting the Disney network. And but yeah, the early days, we just made stuff up and did not ask permission and just tried to make it all work.
But that was such a good story for us, though, because we were still trying to get full funding to like finish the game, and we weren't sure we were going to be able to get it. And now we were able to kind of put out this report saying, well, we tried to do an 8-week test to see if people liked this game. And after 6 weeks, so many people were playing, we had to shut the game down because it was too popular, right? And so that certainly would look good in the report.
Yeah.
Oh, I just love that it's running on Roger Houston's desk. I think that's hilarious.
It's really funny because our Roger Houston equivalent for Toontown Rewritten, a large portion of the game is hosted on a machine at his house, and we have also gotten messages from his internet service provider saying, "Hey, what's going on here? what are you doing in that house?" So it's really funny.
Good tradition.
Amazing.
So going back to the character designs, I guess this is more for Bruce and Felipe. Something that we've talked about a lot on the Toontown Rewritten team, and that a lot of the fans have been sort of enamored with lately, is the character designs for Toontown. There was one fan post I saw recently where they realized the money bags in Toontown, if you remember, has sort of like a very wide head, and that the texture for that is the exact same texture as the tightwad. And a lot of people had no idea. They've been playing this game for 10 plus years and had no idea that, these were two characters using the exact same assets. And I know that was largely, something that had to be done because of the min-spec machines that you had back in 2002. So what did that process look like? Were the character designs sort of informed by the technology limits that you had?
Well, it was painful, is what it was. It was a painful process because it was so low res. Everything had to be kept, to the minimum, which is why you got the swap outs of textures and so forth. We were just basically dealing in what we could do with limited polygons. So there were lots of objections coming from Disney Animation. They did not care for the low res characters, and they didn't think it was Disney. So we got pushed back from Peter Schneider and others, the department, about not just the cogs or the suits, but the avatars themselves. didn't seem to object much to the Disney characters, but they did object to the avatar system.
So I don't know how much either of you two were involved with this, but I believe in the later years, there was at one point an effort to sort of work on the cogs to try and create more modern versions. Does that ring a bell at all?
So what it was not necessarily to create new versions of the cogs. It was more add some depth to their story and create environments for them. So we came up with cog dominiums.
Cogdominiums, yeah.
Cogdominiums. And then we came up with a bunch of concepts for each cog has its own environment that kind of had a lot of visual storytelling about the cog. So yeah, there's a lot of fun examples. Like the Legal Eagle had it was almost like a Eagle Canyon, but made out of file cabinets, stuff like that, and office supplies. That was a lot of fun to put together. And some of it came through. I think, didn't you guys, Shell Games, help us with some of those mini games, the condominiums? I think.
Yeah, we did. We worked on 2 of those, and yeah. There was a time we got in real trouble because we shipped them over to Disney and kind of stopped thinking about it. And it was, I think, a year later, and we put it in our demo reel. But the one we put on our demo reel hadn't been released, and suddenly it was like a big deal that we were showing unreleased content. Somehow we thought it had gone out, and it hadn't.
Mm-hmm. I distinctly remember being on the Toontown message boards and seeing that show reel that Shell Games had released, and be like, "Oh my gosh, look at this new stuff coming!" It never was released. Only one of those 2 mini games was ever released.
Yeah, we got an angry letter from Disney lawyers saying you need to take that down immediately. We're like, what? Sorry.
One thing I remember about the early spec, we were constrained in 2 ways. One was the computer that kids had at the time, only had a certain amount of memory and probably didn't have a graphics card, CPU, things like that. But also the game was downloaded. From the beginning, it was always downloaded to your computer online. And so I think we had a really smart constraint, which was you need to be able to get up and running and playing within a few minutes. And this was, in 99, 2000, 2001, we're talking about a modem, not internet like we have today, broadband. And I remember doing a little spreadsheet of all right, we get this many textures. If they are, 64 by 64 JPEGs, they're going to be 10K. And so, Felipe, you can only have 20 of these in the whole scene. Otherwise, we're going to blow our download budget. And I mean, we're talking about the whole game fitting in a couple of megabytes, not gigabytes, but megabytes. And nowadays that would stream down in an instant. But yeah, both constraints were super, super tough. Yeah. I think one of the smart things that we did early on is try to come up with a look that was a little bit timeless. I mean, you can still see some of the polygon edges, and things don't look as great compared to today. But the way we did the lighting and sort of the flat shading and had a lot of painted in effects certainly made it look better for longer than it otherwise would have.
Yeah, there was a lot of work as well. I mean, I remember, started going back to the characters. I think we planned actually for more optimization that we ended up doing, because a lot of the cogs share the same shape, and then we try to share as many textures as possible. In the end, we ended up not sharing as many textures, but some of them ended up being shared. And even though we ended up with some, I think each cog ended up having its own geometry, at the beginning we planned for, Bruce planned for designs that could share the same geometry. There were a lot of share the same shapes. And then for environments, I played with different patterns and playing with adding polygon color, this and this other way. How could we get the most bang for the buck? what color add to the texture, so multiply by another polygon color could give me the most variety.
Right.
And there was a lot of testing like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you guys were so clever at the business of, like, you'd have these buildings that were just basically 2 straight polys here and 2 straight polys here, but then you'd paint it, you'd overlay a texture on it in a way that really hid the facets. It made it really look curved. It was amazing.
Definitely. And absolutely. I mean, I think that's been one of the big reasons that people, like, you know, kids are still playing Toontown today, because it really, like you said, Joe, has that timeless art style that can appeal to people even compared to today's more modern games.
Yeah.
Now, in Toontown, there's jokes like everywhere. There's the buildings, there's the dialogue, there's knock-knock doors, like everything down to the weapons and the enemies that you're fighting in the game is like one big joke. And so what was the process like for you guys to just come up with all of that? Because it's an absurd amount of stuff in there.
Well, there was I guess we tried to do it in every way that we could. I know I was very passionate about, let's get as many jokes in as possible. So things like the store names was something I took a lot of initiative on, trying to let's see if we can get those to be as good as possible. And one of the technical achievements at Toontown was the sign system for putting the signs on, because we didn't have texture memory to do that. So, you know, Skylar put together this typesetting system so that we could, like, load up a couple fonts and then, like, typeset them in all kinds of crazy ways and put that up there. And it was like, seeing all the work he was going to do on that, it's like, we better get a lot of jokes in there. And then we just looked at every opportunity, like the whole thing with the knock-knock doors. That came out of the fact that, right, at one point, we didn't have all those doors, right? And instead, and so we like, the place looked really vacant with no doors. So Felipe started putting doors in everywhere, but then the doors didn't open, and people were like, what's wrong with the door that doesn't work? So we're like, well, we can't make everything open. Maybe we could just have them do something. And so that's when we came up with the knock-knock jokes. And anyway, so we just looked for every opportunity to get more and more gags in there.
What were some of the things that you guys hoped that you might be able to do with Toontown one day that you just never got the opportunity to?
I mean, I always thought that Toontown had so much potential in the way that, like, the main theme of the game, it's awesome. It's like this irreverent thing of work versus play that we can all relate, adults and kids, and it was so much fun, the environments and characters. And I always felt like, because of the limitations at the time, we didn't realize visually what it could be, and even like game design. It was a lot of super clever things, but we had a lot of limitations. I was always hoping for a Toontown 2 that we were gonna get all the things that we learned, and we were gonna make this amazing game.
One thing I'll add, we had early on, we discovered in our, like, play patterns, looking at our data, that we had a lot of people logging in kind of after school hours in the US. That made total sense. And then around 7, 8, 9, 10 p.m., we had another small spike of people logging in. We thought, that's weird. Are those, like, kids sneaking down to the computer, or and no, it was a lot of, like, moms and dads playing Toontown kind of after the kids went to bed. They either enjoyed it themselves, they were trying to get jelly beans for their kids to play the next day. But yeah, one thing in a sense, Toontown was ahead of its time then, because typically there was one computer in the house, and so you couldn't really play together as a family at the same time. Typically, you had to kind of fight for the one desktop computer, you know, back then. And, you know, that slowly changed over time. Now, you know, kids have Chromebooks and iPads. And so, you know, I think one thing that would have been cool back then would be to see a whole, a family of 5 all playing together easily at the same time. I think that's kind of the magic, the promise of Toontown, and it was a little ahead of its time.
I'd certainly say that, like, well, I'll give one small thing. I know that I'd always wanted to do this one environment. You know what I'm going to say, Joe.
I know what you're going to say. I tried to look for a drawing of it.
Yeah, there's one somewhere. Joey probably has one somewhere. I'd had this idea for a playground that I was always excited about, where the floor kind of curved up towards a hill in the middle, but the hill kept going up, and then it would like turn into the ceiling. And so that the idea was that you could walk along and then start to walk up this and then walk up the wall and then walk in the ceiling. So you'd come into this playground and people would be walking on the ceiling and on the floor and on the wall. And like that was one I'd always hoped we could do, but it would have required some really special physics, gravity changes. How would jumping work? Like a lot of stuff. It would have been hard work, and we just it wasn't that one wasn't going to happen. So. But when we do Toontown 2, I'll definitely try and resuscitate that.
Absolutely.
The black and white environment.
Oh yeah, Funny Farm, right?
Oh, the black and white environment. Also remember the construction zone that we for a while, because we had a lot of the neighborhoods were still under construction, so we were gonna have this construction zone, and there were all these ideas from an early Mickey cartoon with, I don't know, all these construction equipment and crazy stuff happening all over. We never really made it. There was some pretty cool ideas.
Going to Toontown 2, there were some prototypes made. I think people in the community have played those prototypes now. What sort of was the vision for that project, and what were the hopes of how it was going to pan out? And then if you can talk about it, what ultimately happened that, got it on the cutting room floor?
No, I mean, it was pretty simple. I mean, the intention was to try to sell the company into the potential of Toontown. So we were trying to put together prototypes that show the potential, like what a modern version of Toontown would be. And we wanted to add more storytelling to some quests. So we put together basically 2 prototypes. One was the Toontown 2 prototype per se, which was this neighborhood where all the buildings were much more interactive, and they had more storytelling, and they were more cartoony, and so it was like this piano themed building where you could jump on and you would play different sounds. You could create music. And also there were some traps where you could lure a cog to a specific spot and then jump in some sort of mechanism, and you would drop an anvil on top of them from far away. Things like that were more interactive. So that was one prototype. And then the other prototype was called Toon Adventures, which the intention was that when you were walking in Toontown, in one of the neighborhoods, you could enter a building. And when you enter a building, you would go into this other mini game or mini adventure, like mini quest, basically. That it was like these story-based quests where you had to go, and then you go through this little video game, and then completed the quest. It was very story-based, and then came back and got some more jelly beans or new items that you could wear or things like that. So we put together the Cartoon Adventures prototype, and then the other let's say the Toontown Central 2 prototype. And the idea was just to sell the company into the potential of this, to invest, because it was a lot of money to invest. And Toontown was always popular. It had a lot of people playing, but not enough compared to what they were making in movies and new IP and everything. So it was hard to convince the company to invest on something like that. And so at the time, the potential of virtual worlds was kind of like the wave of the future. And we were trying to convince them that this was a worthy investment. But in the end, they decided to go with something else that made more sense for the company. I mean, for the company, it made more sense something where you could use more of the IP instead of starting with this unknown IP, Toontown, which nobody knew, and you had to market from scratch and all that stuff. They wanted to do this World of Worlds or something like that, where it was like a virtual Disneyland kind of thing, which has been recycled over and over since the early days. So it was basically this virtual world where all the Disney characters were alive, and so they went through that and they defunded Toontown basically. So
that was Disney Infinity, I believe, right? Is
yeah,
that what that product ended up being? Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Gotcha.
so. I mean, it was nothing evil. It made sense for the company, but it was unfortunate for us.
So now, all these years later, we're 7 years out from when Toontown closed, and there's still tons of people playing today. I shared with you guys that just earlier this year, we had the most players on Toontown written that we've had in years as a result of quarantine. So, in this era of COVID-19 and everything, what do you think of the role of games like Toontown, and sort of how is it the same as it was when you originally envisioned it, and how do you think it's different just based on the society that we're living in today?
Well, one thing is I think Toontown was as a game was safe. It was a safe place. It was designed that way. I think a lot of the impulse to go play in the safe playground is. It was always designed that way. So now it comes in handy.
Yeah, I think the modern equivalents are for Toontown right now are things like Minecraft and Roblox, are where a lot of the people who would have been playing Toontown back then, like kids that age now, are playing those games in spaces. So in a lot of ways, I do feel like we're way ahead of our time, because those kind of games are becoming so normal. And the main thing that's really changed is fundamentally the business model. Toontown was driven off of this subscription, and when we made the transition into sort of free to play games, Toontown just didn't quite figure out how to do that. I mean, Toontown didn't, Club Penguin didn't, almost none of the old school virtual worlds did, and in a lot of ways, some of these new games, they have a lot of the original vision of Toontown. I guess one thing we don't talk about too much, even though we ended up with the kind of battling the cogs vision in the early days of Toontown, we talked a lot about creative stuff. We wanted people to be able to paint their own buildings and build their own neighborhood, and we talked a lot about that stuff. But when we sat down and tried to do it, it's like, the technology is just too hard, and how's that going to work, and all these challenges with it. And we ended up kind of going more down like kind of this RPG light kind of structure. But nowadays a lot of these games are so based on user generated content, and I do feel like if someone, if we're going to bring back a Toontown here in the modern day, it would want to have a lot of those things that we couldn't do back then, but are now starting to become, normal and very desirable.
And I guess in the later years of Toontown, I think we got a little bit of a taste of that through Toontown parties, where people were able to sort of make their own mini neighborhoods with different activities and stuff. So, Sean, I don't know if you want to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I mean, it gives you a sense of ownership, right? You get the anticipation and excitement of building this area, and then you wait for the time or the day, and then you get to see people enjoy it, right? A huge reason, basically the main reason that I love game development and have been developing games for 16 years is because of how I see people enjoying the games that I've made, right? And the Roblox, the Minecraft, the Toontown parties, you get a small feeling of that, right? And it's like the more that these modern systems can provide those tools for people, the more the game designers of next year and the years after will be forged in these awesome environments where you can create your own stuff, right? So there's a lot of power in creation, and it's also a lot it's difficult. But as the technology gets better, as the tools get better, more and more people can stretch that muscle. I mean, you see kids who want to be, YouTube content creators now for various reasons. Like they either want to, do vlogs or making stuff or playing games, and it's just really exciting that it's a new way of being creative, right? A more accessible way of being creative in a lot of ways.
To put you on the spot, Sean, if you were making Toontown parties today with today's technology, what would they look like, you think?
Oh man, I like so we had there was Toontown racing. I mean, we'd done some early prototypes of Toontown ice skating. At the time, I think I was playing a lot of SSX Tricky. I think I've probably told a related story about that. But I think that having a Toontown party where you could make a spline track and set up either obstacle courses or races or sort of more again creative, right? So I make a track in my party where you skate or you race for a while, and then you transfer into a obstacle course, like a Ninja Warrior type thing, right? That you've made, and just being able to then have these sort of relay races or competitions for all the tunes that come to your party. I think that would be really cool. I don't know, but
Oh yeah, I think that's awesome.
I love the idea of drawing a spline and it just becomes a track that you can then play in 3D, right? That'd be cool.
Sean, I went to get the sound effects box. I got it right here. I'm pretty sure I got our Toontown party sounds in here somewhere. Pretty sure they're in here. I'll see if I can hunt them out.
Yeah, Joe, you were showing before your original Toontown packaging. It's
right.
kind of fun that we all have these sort of I have a Toontown Happy Dance shirt, and we've all sort of got these physical mementos, but it's also we all have these great stories from Toontown, right?
The funny thing about this is we did a CD-ROM for stores. We actually had to partner with Sony to get the CD-ROM made, which tells you a little bit about how the trials and tribulations of being an internal project without continuous support over the years. But yeah, it's funny looking back because we tried so hard to get a retail, CD-ROM, walk into Walmart and buy it version of Toontown back then. It felt like such a step that would legitimize us back in 2003, 2004. And then we did it, and within a year or two, it became irrelevant because broadband started catching up. Other games started to do direct digital distribution. And then, nowadays, of course, the whole physical packaged goods is dead. This was actually our first attempt. I don't know, Jesse, if you remember this.
I do.
So we printed our own CD-ROMs at one point. And this is, just for scale, this is a mini CD. I mean, some of you watching probably won't even know what a CD is. But we made these little mini CDs and gave them out at a Disneyana convention in Anaheim. But the people that showed up were sort of Disney collectors. They were the grandmas and grandpas that collect Disney memorabilia, kind of porcelain Disney stuff. And there we were in our booth handing out CD-ROMs, and not even ones that they recognized, like these weird mini CD-ROMs. And people just looked at them and walked away with a frown. It was so sad. And if we had only waited a couple years, we would have probably avoided all this energy put into trying to become a legitimate CD-ROM product. Just another example of, the funny timing of these things, of being an R&D project, really.
So speaking of bringing Toontown stuff into the real world, I don't know how many of you attended the original ToonFest, but I'm assuming that Joe did, considering he's wearing the shirt.
I got the shirt. This is a 2006. Yeah.
So what was it like, getting to meet Toontown fans in person at that event for what I assume was the first time at such a large scale?
It was awesome. I mean, we had people show up in costume with a wire hanger rigged to put their tune name over their heads, printed out construction paper. I just love seeing that. And I have pictures from, because my whole family went, and they kind of went as fans of Toontown, not because their dad worked on the game. And I have pictures that they were just babies back then. You know, it was a lot of fun. We did a panel like this. We did town halls. We showed new stuff that was coming up. You know, that was a real connection with people. Yeah, it was great.
I always think of the first time we showed Toontown to the world, which was at that SIGGRAPH event.
Oh no! Yeah.
Right? Because there was no YouTube or anything back then, and so the way you showed stuff was like at these conventions and trade shows and things, and there was this 3D web contest at SIGGRAPH about who's got the coolest 3D web I don't know, application, and we showed Toontown, and like the place went really nuts. People had never seen anything like that, and that was exciting to kind of get to see that as well.
You're not telling the full story though.
I don't know if I remember.
We practiced you had to do it in like 2 minutes, or else I think you got shot by Nerf guns. Or something.
Yeah. They would boo you off the stage and all this. Everything had to fit exactly within.
Right. So Jesse, Daniel, and I practiced to get it just this tight presentation. And part of it was playing the cannon mini game where you shoot yourself out of a cannon into a water tower. And the script was that I was supposed to miss the first time, and everyone would be like, "Ah," and then I was supposed to just barely miss the second time, and everyone would be like, "Oh," and then make it on the third time. And every time we practiced it, I did exactly that. And then, sure enough, in front of 5,000 people in the live thing, you know, my hands were shaking, and I aimed the cannon, and I shot it, and I missed the third shot. And I felt like Fred Flintstone drinking on stage.
That was so funny, Joe. You were so crushed, like I ruined it. But like no, but people were so.
No, people still loved it.
That mattered. It was funny.
Yeah, I still have nightmares about that third shot.
So I want to start with Bruce for this next question, since we haven't heard from Bruce in a little bit, but anyone else can feel free to chime in too. What would you guys, or what advice would you guys give to people creating Toontown content today? You know, not just the people who are still keeping the game online and everything with the various server projects, but even, you know, people who are creating artwork and costumes and, you know, vlogs, all that sort of stuff.
This aspect of the community, I really don't have a whole lot of connection with, but the fact that there is a community out there and that you can share real world artifacts based on Toontown is something really valuable. Connecting on a thing that gives you pleasure, people. Is the real value of the game, I think. I don't know what I would say animation-wise, but
Bruce, let me ask this a different way, like, because now it's at a point where people can kind of potentially add their own characters, add their own costumes, add their own animations. Do you have thoughts about general guidelines for like making sure things kind of fit into the Toontown aesthetic? Are the things you think of that way?
For us, it was drawing on old cartoons, especially Warner Brothers cartoons, as opposed to Disney. I mean, Disney did gags, you know, did shorts that were based on gags and so forth. But a lot of the other studios that didn't go in the direction that Disney went, which was extended narratives and so forth. A lot of the other studios just did 6 or 7 minute gag cartoons. And that's where the attacks and so forth came from. So got those cartoons that were done in the 30s and the 40s by Warner Brothers and others. That's where the animation came from.
Yeah, and the humor as well, I think, is more Warner Brothers. Some of the early Mickey cartoons are also pretty, a little more irreverent.
I'll echo Joe. Like, he was talking about ToonFest, seeing the cosplay, and you know, I had the privilege of seeing a little hint of that, when Joey invited Jesse and I to ToonFest, that Replay FX and things like that. Just like, it's just it's humbling. It's awesome. Just seeing people, enjoying something that you helped create so much that they then create costumes or, the artwork and, the whole board. You guys had the board of artwork that people could make there, but you also showcased some other artwork from people, and people had made the gags and like physical representations of them. And it's just like, it's so great. That all is so great and so fun to see. It's just really fun.
One of our design rules early on that I think served us well is that the gameplay should never get in the way of the socializing and the community. So one of the things that a lot of other online games were doing at the time, whether it's EverQuest or this is before World of Warcraft and way before Fortnite, was that, due to the fiction of the world, it should take a really long time to travel from this island to that part of the world. And there's no way to teleport because that wouldn't make sense. And there's no way to talk to your friend because he's not in the same castle as you. And so it made those games, like, they took themselves very seriously, and I enjoyed playing them, but it made it hard to socialize. And so one of the rules that we came up with was that, this is a social space first and a game second. And so if you log in, you need to be able to get to your friends. You need to be able to chat with your friends. You need to be able to group up with your friends easily and hop on the trolley. And so everything else came second, and I think it echoed, some of what we were saying earlier about, this was a game about connecting people first and foremost. And whether that was online or, like I said, in the same living room, that's the master that we served at the time, is that connection.
And I have to say, I think that was Joe's contribution. I got that over and over again from Joe. My own perspective was, I was going into this world and I was going to have this adventure and I was going to great, but Joe and in fact the team of the game advocated for this business of teaming up and doing it as a group and always stressing that. It was a difficult problem for me,
right?
But it was a central principle of the game.
As we start to wrap up here, I'll ask, what are some of the takeaways that you guys had from working on Toontown that you've carried forward to other projects that you've worked on since?
Go ahead. I was just gonna say, wow, network games are sure hard to test. That if you're gonna make a network game, like expect it to take 4 times as much work as building a single player game.
I think what I remember is, first and foremost, like how much a small talented team can do. So if you're out there thinking about being a game developer or an artist or a creator of any sort, it can be demoralizing to think, well, these big companies have thousands of people working on them. And but I don't envy those big companies. In fact, I think it was really fun to be, a 5, 10, 15 person team that had a goal, had a mission, had something to prove, and you bring in really talented people, and it's amazing what you can do. And it's funny, I was remembering back to my first summer at Imagineering. I was an intern, and it was a little bit of a crazy space. Like the studio had some folks in it that, were characters, let's say. And I took it, I was coming out of University of Virginia and had never been to California, had never been to Hollywood. And I thought, this is what people talk about Hollywood. Like, you have personalities and you have fights and you have eclectic people and passionate artists. And it was, people had Pepto-Bismol in their drawers, it was crazy. And then I went back, my internship was over. I went back to school and then came back the next year. And, then I met people like Felipe and Bruce and like really talented people who were also really good people, and Jesse, of course. And that's the thing I miss the most, is just talented people who are also really good people. Those were really fun days.
Yeah, it was amazing one thing that I remember is that there were no producers for a while. It was just we figuring out what to do, and Joe would come up to me and, hey, why don't we do this? Okay. And I would do it. He tested, done in the game. Like, there was nobody to approve anything. Like, it's just, let's do it. Okay, why don't we do this? Okay.
Yeah, for a while I was the closest thing to a producer, and that's not a good sign.
Ooh, that's a bad thing. I was just gonna say that making games that are fun and easy to play and don't exclude people, that include people. I think you talked about that bump in the analytics of the parents coming down to play. I love that. I just totally love that, because it's like, why not why not make a game that the parents are, if it's a good enough game, people are gonna want to play it no matter who they are or what they think, right? So I think that's just a testament to what you folks did and continued to do.
And that was something really important to us, because we knew that the parents would be the ones paying for it. And if we could make a game the parents would want to play and the kids would want to play, people would pay for it, a lot longer, and you'd get that intergenerational play going. And that's something we look for in a lot of projects, is when is there that opportunity for multi-generational play.
Yeah, I think that's one of the other things that I took away. Like, if you're able to come up with a theme that it's kind of more universal, something that both adults and kids and all kinds of people can relate to, and have a fun, strong foundation. Like, for example, the basic battle is just fun. It's just fun to run around Toontown. Then the theme is cool and you can relate to it, since you adult, kid, whatever. So if you get that strong foundation, you can have something amazing that lasts for you. Like, it's amazing how long Toontown has lasted.
Last question here for all of you is just where can people find you if they want to check out other projects that you've worked on since Toontown? So maybe we can start with Bruce and just work down the line.
I'm retired at this point. Gone from Toontown to work on Pirates of the Caribbean, which is another Disney game that has been revived, and it's to people, I guess, somewhere. And now I'm retired and I'm farming in Colorado, so you can't check out my projects.
Eat your vegetables
Online.
All right, Felipe, where can people find you if they want to check out other projects you've done?
I think is my website would be the place to go. It's felipelara.net. So that's where I have the other projects, the latest projects, virtual reality for healthcare. I had another project that I worked on for a few years that was very inspired by Toontown, but I was trying to take the same kind of irreverent humor and use it for something that was for social change. And it was kind of like a critical thing, take it on consumerism and try to link that to nonprofit organizations and stuff like that. It was very ambitious. In the end, it did not work out at the time. Maybe one day, but that project is also showcased there a little bit. There's a few things that you can see there.
All right, on to Jesse.
Yeah, if you go to look at shellgames.com, you can see most of my stuff, and some of the other things with my books and such you can see at jesseshell.com.
And Joe?
Yeah, I co-founded a startup called CodeSpark about 6 years ago. We have a game that introduces kids to programming. This is one of our characters. He's called The Glitch. I've actually worked with a handful of Toontown folks on the game, including Felipe, Richard on animation. Bridget did some concept art. So if you play CodeSpark, download it from the App Store, I promise you will recognize a couple of little Easter eggs in the game.
It's a lot of fun. Coast Guard, pretty good project.
All right, last but not least, we've got Sean.
Yeah, well, I still work at Shell Games, obviously, so that goes for me too. But if you want a board game, if you go to surprisinglyfungames.com, I'm kickstarting. Originally, I was going to kickstart it this year, but 2020. But hopefully 2021, I'll be kickstarting a game called Mischief at the Museum. And then again, it's a game that can be played, 1 to 6 players. Kids can enjoy it. I've had playtesters as young as 5 and 6 play it, but the parents can also play after the kids go to bed. And I'm trying to make it a gateway game to sort of, showcase the power of board games and things like that. So check that out. Sign up for the mailing list. Kickstart. Get ready for that Kickstarter.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for being here. I know I certainly appreciate it. The Toontown fans are really going to appreciate it when they see this footage. So hopefully we can do something like this again in the future. I know there's probably going to be a ton of fan questions that people are going to be asking that maybe we can answer at some point. But thank you all so much, and hope you have a good day.
All right. Thanks, Joey.
Thank you, Joey.
See you, everyone.
Great seeing everyone. Hey, Todd.
Hey, Todd.
Todd.
What's up?
Let's test our stuff.
Yeah, we can use a cake.
To the cave!
Hey, Todd.
Todd.
What's up?
Let's test our stuff.
Yeah, we can use a cake.
To the cave! Hey guys, let me test the name shop real quick. That looks good. Okay. That looks good. It all works.
Welcome to Toontown, everybody!
Thanks, Mickey.
Thank you for those new animations, Calendar Buddy! Now go get those cogs!
Look, there's the fish elevations I made. He looks happy.
Hey, what's that sound?
That's just the plane I animated.
Toontastic.
We need gags to fight the cogs.
Let's go play Sean's minigame. This way, guys.
Match Mini it is.
I'm definitely getting a treasure trader. Cogs hate treasure traders because with treasure traders, I can collect and share treasures with all my friends.
Quack, 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 quack.